Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, the wonderful host of many podcasts, of HBO shows that I have watched and not watched. Great critic, great writer, great film media person, Vince Mancini.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you.
I love to hate movies. This is like a great, this is a great format for me.
Here's the thing too. I love the way that you have hated movies, but also the way that you like show love for movies. Like I think I mentioned this to you in when I emailed you about doing the show, but your review of Plane that you did a little while ago just killed me in a way that I was like, you know what? This is exactly what this is the kind of review this movie deserves, I think.
It really brought me back to the days when I could write reviews like all in shtick. I feel like that was, because I'm coming from the old school of blogging, like in the late aughts / like early 2010s, where it was just all like shticky stuff. And I remember how much fun it was. And it's really hard. Most of that stuff's pretty hack and you can't fit it in anywhere, and it's understandably died off. But if you can find like narrow ways to still do it, which I thought Plane gave me the opportunity to do, it's like, oh yeah, this was fun. I remember that. I remember when the internet was fun.
Yeah, I think there's always more room to make the internet fun again, and that's a good chance to do it.
I'd love to make that happen, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, we'll see, especially with this movie that we're talking about today, which is trying to be very fun. Mm-hmm. And does it succeed? I thought so, but you didn't seem to think so on all the degrees. And it's gotten pretty mixed reviews across the board, and sort of in retrospect, it looks like. And that's old Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, this is a funny one. I feel like I don't know. Hate is maybe overstating how much I dislike this movie. It's more like I feel like I understand what this movie could be, and I hate how much it falls short of that, because there's things in it that I do really like, but I do ultimately I do find it very annoying as a movie.
An annoying, I think, is not the descriptor that you want as a person who's like, if you're Taika Waititi, who seems to be, as of late, sort of skewed in this more like annoying light,
Sure.
I think that's kind of like a lens that people view him through a lot. And if you're going to be that guy who's going to make the cheeky wink and nod, oh, we're going to have a goofy time, but you're going to do that in this movie that has like, it's about the Nazis. It's about Nazi Germany. It's about nationalism. It's about identity. Like, it's got this level to it that I think merits, you can't not do a comedy about it. You can't not make satire about it, but it merits a degree of like, all right, let's be maybe a little bit either going into the sort of more full bore, like, let's get a little more off kilter with it. Or we can do it straight and narrow and just make another war movie about the Nazis and the horrors of World War II.
Yeah, like I feel like this came out before Taika Waititi sort of became, more annoying. I'm trying to be generous in a way because but when this came out, like I was a huge fan. Like I really liked the Hunt for the Wilder People and a lot of things that he'd done before this movie. But yeah, I agree with you. It's sort of, I thought he was going to go for it when he made this movie. Like that's sort of the whole pitch and the whole campaign. Like he's dressed as Hitler. And at a certain point, and I don't necessarily think he was like wrong for this, but it seemed like he was scared of getting think pieced to death. And so he sort of made this half in, half out version of what I think he might have been going for. And because like to me, this movie it's sort of like Moonrise Kingdom with Nazis. Like it's very much sort of it looks like a Wes Anderson movie that's going to be about Nazis, which is like a really good idea, I think. Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, because at one point the girl says to the main character, like, you're not a Nazi, you're just like a 10-year-old boy who likes dressing up in costumes. And like I think that kind of does describe the Nazis, like in a lot of ways. Like I don't think, like I think that was kind of the draw for all of them, is like they had this, it's like a boys club where you go and you go hang out with your friends and you wear costumes and you march around.
You maybe drink a little beer, rough a couple people up.
I think it scratches that tribal itch that everybody has. And then it clearly like it went very wrong. And I think that's like a very interesting story to tell. And I think that's like an angle that shockingly maybe hasn't like been done in a Nazi movie. And then it's also like he's playing the Hitler as the imaginary friend. So it's kind of like Drop Dead Fred or like True Romance, when what's his name talks to Elvis in the mirror.
Yeah,
like that's that's a funny idea. And I would like to see that movie where he really went for it, but I feel like he got halfway into it and just sort of was like, no, this is going to be a very earnest, like schmaltzy love story where like a little boy learns not to be a Nazi anymore.
Yeah, there's, I was looking at some of the other reviews of the movie, because it got really overwhelmingly positive reviews when it came out. It got it's certified fresh, 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, 94% audience score.
Did he win like an Oscar for it or something?
Yeah, yeah.
He was nominated? Yeah.
He got the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress for Scarlett Johansson. It was nominated for not Best Director. No, I thought he'd gotten nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but I'm incorrect on that. But yeah, it was nominated for 6 Oscars. A lot of below-the-line stuff, production design, best film editing, best costume design, But, what's fascinating is I was reading, I think your points about the Wes Anderson-ness, they actually tie in really well with a whole side of criticism that I didn't even think about, which is UK-centric critics, which this film was hated in the UK. The Robbie Collin, the critic who accidentally you heard a little bit of him there on the clip. He said that he was aghast. The scenes at the camp were the laziest ripoff of Moonrise Kingdom I've seen in my life. There's no sense that anything is at stake. It sentimentalizes and trivializes the Holocaust, and the stuff that Jojo is indoctrinated with is made up of old bore outlines, and that's not what anti-Semitism is.
Sure. I mean, like, to me, the fact that it is reminiscent of Moonrise Kingdom is not necessarily why it's bad. I kind of think that he should have embraced that more, if anything. Like, yeah. Like I think it should be. Again, I think I like the idea. The idea is weird, and it's about how they all liked playing dress up, and that was kind of the whole thing. I like that as a premise, but then instead of that going wrong in the way that mobs and groupthink kind of goes wrong, it's like he turns it into, he realized that Nazism was bad because he fell in love with a girl, which is also Wes Anderson-y, but like the worst part, like the thing that I've always like hated about Wes Anderson is like the little kid falling in love storyline, which a lot of his movies have. Yeah. And I don't know. I can't take prepubescent kids falling in love as a plot line. Like I can't imagine like anything more boring than this weird fake love with out any sexual tension in it.
Well, especially I think we have the benefit of being adults, we get to know like, oh yeah, well that love is all bullshit anyway. So like having a lot of the plot hinge on character growth being a part of something that we know is like, this is not real. It's going to fade away because you're a child. There's nothing really there.
Yeah. And it's just, yeah, I don't know that it even exists in the way that movies depict it. Movies always sort of, they want to depict kids as like shrunken adults. So it's like this weird hallmarkizing effect where it's just, they're little dolls. It's not like they don't ever treat it in the way that, I don't know, prepubescent crushes actually work. It's just like an adult relationship sort of grafted on a kid. It's kind of like, have you ever read a memoir and the author is doing like the fake little kid voice, like they're writing in the voice of themselves as a little kid, and it's like this just phony.
Yeah, all kids across media, kids are always too smart and too precocious.
Yes,
for their own good, and they don't act the way that real children, for the most part, act. I'm sure there are probably some kids out there who are very eloquent, and that's actually, in retrospect, like I do think there are parts of this, and this sort of speaks to like the commentary on tribalism and stuff that the movie is doing. There's a lot of the kids in this movie for a while are buffoons and idiots. Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, even Jojo is like, he blows himself up. He has to stop being an active part of the Hitler Youth because he like threw a hand grenade and fucked up his feet. Mm-hmm. His other friends are all like, they're portrayed to be idiots buying into the propaganda because they're kids.
Right.
But then as soon as you have like love entering the picture,
all of a sudden cheapens the whole message of what I would think they're trying. I mean, I also like the idea that he, it becomes disillusioned with Nazism just because he's not very good at.
Yeah, he's bad. He's just bad at it.
Yeah,
that's why I stopped being a Boy Scout, was because I was bad at being a Boy Scout. I was like, I don't give a shit about this anymore. I don't want to go camping.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the early, people that were probably the early anti-Nazi adopters, like probably a lot of them were just like, oh yeah, I'm not good at what they're trying to do. Like that's not, like I can't be part of that thing. Like I'm just naturally like I can't. It's different if you were really good at that thing and you had to make the conscious decision of, yes, this is wrong and I'm not going to do it. That's a little different than just being like, well, I can't. Mm-hmm. I'm not capable of it. So of course, like then it's not much of a dilemma for you.
Right. It's not the moral objection. It's just the boredom. It's like, oh, okay. I'd rather play. It's not the 40s, so you're not going to play video games. But it's like, I'd rather hang out with my friends and play Halo than try and earn merit badges. Like that's the main frame that I had when I was a 14-year-old, and I was like, you know what, fuck the Boy Scouts.
Or like me saying like, oh, I'm so opposed to the NFL. I would never play in that because they're a terrible organization and they support CTE and their athletes, but really it's like, well, obviously that's not a choice that I would have to make.
Right. The choice would be made for you.
Right. Yeah.
It's
like, oh, cool. Yeah. No one's asking you.
Yeah, exactly. Now there was one moment that I want to ask you about. And I remember this.
Okay. Hopefully I'll remember it super well.
I think you probably will. It's a pretty pivotal moment in the movie, but it's the moment that I was like, as a viewer, I was brought to like, oh, we got serious now. And I wish that I was not talking about this with you in the context of like having thought about it more, but not had a chance to really revisit it other than just like thinking about it a lot and reading stuff. Like I got the script back over on this bookshelf back here, and I was just like flipping through it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like, it's dividing it's straddling the fence a little bit, right? Where it's not really, it's got its foot in both camps of being weird, but also trying to be a good commentary. And and a good comedic commentary was really difficult to do. But the moment that really like brought me to a place of like awe as a viewer was when you see Jojo bump into his mom at the gallows and bumps into and and recognizes her shoes. And I was like, oh, that got me. And now the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, that's just a cheat code narratively. Like, of course, I'm going to feel sad when the kid stumbles upon his mom.
Yeah. That's again, like, that's not really him coming to realize the Nazis were bad. Like, they killed his mom.
Yeah. Of course they're bad. They killed
yeah,
us. That's just like a microcosm of what they did.
Yeah, it's kind of like, have you ever watched like a Tyler Perry movie?
I've watched a couple Tyler Perry movies, yeah.
Or like, like a Nicholas Sparks adaptation. It's always like there's a woman and she meets like this hot new dude who's like, basically perfectly her cup of tea. And like if there was going to be tension in that script, like her husband at the time would have to be, like kind of a nice guy, but it's always like she's always with some like boyfriend or husband that's like beating her already. It's always like a domestic violence situation. So there's like no tension because she doesn't have to really make a decision. It's like, oh, this perfect guy or the guy that beats me, like that's not a decision. So that's kind of narratively that's like working on the same level where it's like, well, yeah, he realized the Nazis were bad. Also, they killed his mom. Like, well,
of course you're going to think the Nazis are bad if they kill your mom. You have to realize the Nazis are bad for other reasons, Jojo. Like that's really the heart of it.
Yeah, one would hope. Like if you were going to get into like I thought this movie was going to sort of get into why that would have had an attraction to a little kid. And then also, would like his character arc would be sort of seeing all the ways that it goes wrong. But like you said, it is a bunch of like narrative cheat codes where he doesn't really learn that the Nazis are bad. He like falls in love with the Jewish girl and like notices that they killed his mom, which is, I don't know. It's lazy.
It is. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, this is a rare moment where I actually get to quote a guest review back to them. But I think you make a great point where it's Jojo Rabbit is at its best when it leans into its weirdness. Crumbling nationalism is a backdrop for people struggling to cope, leftover style. I was far more interested in Sam Rockwell's character and ambiguously gay comedic Kurtz for the dying days of Nazism. Now that would have been a movie. But Waititi spends so much energy trying to convince us that the story is universal that he often loses what made it novel in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with myself.
Shocker. But this is like, I think that's such a great point that I was not in my initial viewing experience able to even think about just because I got swept up on it all. I mean, it's a good pitch. Like I'm swept up in the pitch for what it is too. Sure. But then
for what I want it to be.
But that's the thing. Like you sit around and this happens. This has happened with many movies that I've watched where I'm like, oh yeah, I loved it at first. And then I revisit it and I'm like, oh yeah, I just got tricked.
I mean, it's okay to get tricked.
Of course.
I think part of the fun of the movies is getting tricked. And there's definitely things that people point out, like issues with movies that I still love, but I still love them if if the trick still holds up.
Right.
But this one is tough because I feel like I'm watching it and I'm like feeling the notes process while I'm watching Jojo Rabbit because I think the movie that I was envisioning is kind of the one that Taika Waititi wanted to make. Like that's the sense that I get. But I think at a certain point, like he got worried about people saying that, he was like glamorizing Nazism or, he was having a little too much fun dressing up like Hitler and doing Hitler things, which I sort of get, but also you can't really, it's hard to make good art from the perspective of, okay, nobody yell at me.
Yeah, that's the thing. 'Cause it's art by committee.
Yeah. It's art that's like, I'm going to like, if you try to make art like above criticism, it's ends up being just sort of nothing to no one. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because like if I was looking at some of his development process for it, and obviously this was a film that he had been developing for a really long time. Caging Skies came out in 2008. He first began writing it. It looks like around 2010, and the screenplay, the first draft, was written in 2011. Didn't have Hitler in it at all. Didn't have any comedy in it. It was basically just like an adaptation of the novel that it was based on. Then he started putting in comedy, but he still like could not. He just didn't pitch it. His quote He's afraid to pitch. Exactly. Like a quote from him was, "I just sent the script out and let that do the talking because it's very hard to start a conversation with. It's about a little boy in the Hitler Youth." And then when I say, "Oh, but don't worry, it's got humor in it," it just gets worse.
I mean, like I remember all these quotes going around, and I remember there being like a big ad campaign where he has to like hold people's hand and say like, "Oh, it's a satire," it's a satire. And like I just remember the whole ad campaign would just be him like saying satire 1,000 times. And I part of me understands that, but at the same time, like Hogan's Heroes was a comedy about Nazis like 50 years ago. Like, are we pretending that like why is it too soon in 2017 or whenever, what was it, 2019?
2019.
Yeah.
But
like, why would it be too soon in 2019 if it wasn't in the 60s?
It also feels weird for something that is being labeled in all of its marketing as a satire and as an anti-hate satire, which is about as broad of a direction for satire as you can get. But it feels weird for it to feel like there's not really any teeth in it. Like it's not really bringing anything. Satires, in my mind, is like it's got claws. It's drawing blood a little bit.
Doing an anti-hate satire, I would imagine you have to show people hating. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like when we think of satire, I guess you think of like that. What is it? A modest proposal.
A modest proposal. The classic satire.
Yeah, he writes from the perspective of someone who thinks we should eat the Irish. Mm-hmm. Like that is a satire because he's taking the position of the opposition and like sort of taking it to its logical conclusion. Mm-hmm. I feel like this does the opposite of that. I feel like this stops halfway and is like, no, don't be a Nazi because like your mom will get hung, and what if your girlfriend is a Jew
and your mentor who's a Nazi and is secretly gay is going to get shot?
Yeah,
that's not satire.
Like it would hit so much harder if he had this great mentor and he just like loved, and he had to watch someone that he had loved and had grown to respect doing like terrible things. Like, wouldn't that hit harder?
You'd think.
Yeah.
I feel like, however, we are both in this sort of position, and you obviously, I feel like we're more in it upon your initial watch than I was, but where we're like, all right, it's flawed, but it's got some good points to it. Like it has some parts that are still worth merit and worth like talking about and being like, you know what, there's some good in here.
Yeah.
Which is nice. But I do always like to start now diving into the bad reviews from the general audience, from the people, because
I think it's sorry. I'm still meaning to interrupt you, but I do think it's interesting that it got nominated for so many awards and stuff. Because I feel perfectly comfortable being like, oh yeah, that was sort of a C+, B- movie, and it was fine. But then a few months later, it's like winning the best adapted screenplay Oscar. I feel like some movies, when you give it the sheen of awards, it makes you want to hate it more. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, that was a fine movie, but if you tell me that it's the best movie of the year, now I feel compelled to point out all the flaws, kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I'm looking at the screenplay nominees from that year, and it was up against The Irishman, Joker, Little Women, and The Two Popes. Now, The Two Popes is the only one of those that I did not see.
Mm-hmm.
But even right off the bat, like, I think that my vote, if I were in the Academy, I would probably wind up throwing that to The Irishman.
Oh, I'd go Little Women.
Little Women is a close one. That's the thing. Like, I was such a fan of Little Women in a way that I didn't expect.
Yes.
And it's a really nice, but both of that's, it's kind of close for me. And Jojo Rabbit winning seemed like such a surprise. And I think that maybe that's could be part of why they got it. Cause it's got this novelty to it. Oh, we're going to give the comedy an award.
Mm-hmm.
We never give comedies awards. Let's do this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I hadn't seen any of the movies and I just saw like the trailers for all of them, I would have been like, oh, that's so cool that Jojo Rabbit won. What a cool choice that was.
Yeah. Wow. The Academy. That's a really crazy choice given the anti-Nazi comedy an Oscar.
Yeah. But then when you actually see the movie, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. Of course they picked like this sort of toothless, schmaltzy one.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are a lot of the people who I'm looking up on Google of the 1-star reviews of this movie. And
I feel like with this one, this is the one where I want to criticize it, but I also feel like a lot of the really negative reviews are going to be even more wrong than I think the movie is. But go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the really bad reviews or the people who gave it all 1 star are they either don't think it's funny or they think that it is it's bad to do anything involving the Nazis at all.
Right.
But
I would imagine that there's a lot of reviews that are just they're against the concept of making comedy about the Nazis, which is sort of the opposite of why I don't like it.
Mm-hmm. But I did find my favorite review of a 1-star review of Jojo Rabbit. I sifted through to get this gem from Reese Bunker, who gave this movie 1 star. The movie was good. However, there was so much buildup for the romance of Jojo and the other girl. Why did they not kiss?
Okay.
I'm so upset. This movie was great up until I got blueballed at the end. 1 star, they should have kissed.
Sure. Why not? How old was she? So he was like 10 and she was what?
She
13,
was, I think,
14?
high school. I think she was 13, maybe 14.
Yeah.
I'm looking back up. Let's scroll back up into that plot. Yes, she is a teenage Jewish girl and his late sister's former classmate.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Well, why not? Why don't they have sex then?
Why don't they? Come on. Reese,
really consummate it. Let's go.
The one person who should have been given notes on this movie was Reese, because then this movie would have been cranked up to a whole new level of steaminess.
Yeah. That's very much from like the George Lucas school of. Have you ever heard that conversation where they're it's like George Lucas and they're sort of brainstorming Indiana Jones, and he's like, George Lucas is really adamant that Ravenwood and Indiana Jones like she should have been like 11 when they had
what? No,
the romance. It's like a real thing. You can find it. That was what he actually wanted.
Oh, George. Oh no. Why? What a strange man. Now I think we've sort of covered a lot of the ways that you would potentially make this movie better. Mm-hmm. That's well-trod ground. Let's instead wrap things up by, in your opinion, what do you feel like if people wanted to watch something that does what this movie is trying to do in a better way? You know,
God, that's such a tough question. Oh, that is a great question. What movie does this in a better way?
I feel like, there's one that when I was reading the, again, back into the interviews that Taika Waititi was doing at the time, there was a lot of comparisons satirically to Doctor Strangelove. Mm. And I feel like having read and seen Doctor Strangelove more recently than Jojo Rabbit, it's crazy to me that they are in the same realm of comparison.
Yeah, like to me, Doctor Strangelove is a movie that's like about paranoia, and it's sort of about how, fear of the other drove so much of like the Cold War sort of thinking, and that like I was saying, I think that Jojo Rabbit is more about that sort of tribalism, and having bad mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote about Magic Mike. And in a weird way, I think that there are some elements that like that is sort of a movie about having bad male mentors, and it is sort of about tribalism. Because it's basically, you got your Channing Tatum character who's about 30, and then his sort of male mentor is the McConaughey character who's about 40, and then Channing Tatum meets Alex Pettyfer's character who's about 20, and they're sort of like at different stages in this journey, this like male stripper journey, and sort of the arc of Channing Tatum's character is realizing that he might be a shitty mentor for this kid, and I kind of think that there is elements of that in Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit is definitely from the perspective of the younger one. So that'd be a slightly different movie, but in terms of like learning about what it is to be a man from the wrong people, I kind of think that it did a lot of those things better than Jojo Rabbit.
Ooh, I mean, that's fascinating, and another great reason for me to finally watch Magic Mike, which I still have not done. I haven't watched any of them, but I got to get in there now.
The second two, I don't really care about. I think the first one's very interesting, and I really liked it a lot.
I was reading, because I obviously, everybody's talking about it now with the third in the series out, and I was reading a lot of people really liked the second better than the first.
Yeah, I think people went into Magic Mike expecting like a fun romp about male strippers, and it's like a financial crisis movie about like bad male mentors. And then in Magic Mike 2, that's kind of like the movie that people went into the first one expecting. Like Magic Mike 2 is actually like a fun romp about male strippers. So
there's that fun romp you've been asking for all along. Nobody wants to think about the financial crisis.
Yeah.
Well, Vince, I am glad that you and I were able to revisit Jojo Rabbit together, and now I'm going to go watch Magic Mike.
I hope I made some halfway coherent points. Thank you for indulging me.
Of course. Thanks for doing the show. And of course, everybody should go check out your reviews on Uprocks and follow you on Twitter. And where else? Where's the best places they can see your stuff and hear your stuff?
Yeah, Uprocks number one. I'm on Twitter at Vince Mancini, and I have a couple podcasts, the Frotcast, and I have a podcast about The Wire. Pod Yourself The Wire. It's actually the spinoff of our Sopranos podcast, Pod Yourself a Gun. That makes the title of Pod Yourself the Wire make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. You got to know the lore.
Yeah,
Pod Yourself the Wire.
Yeah.
And you check those out wherever you get podcasts, I assume.
That's right. Yeah. And we have our premium episodes at patreon.com/frotcast. That's for all the early episodes and the bonus stuff. But yeah, you can still listen for free.
Go give all that a listen, folks. It's very fun. It's a good time. And you can follow me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, at Blockbusting Pod on all the socials. And go follow the YouTube channel, Blockbusting Podcast. We're going to start posting all the old episodes there for archival purposes. And what a time it will be. And it's going to be a long couple weeks of uploading shit. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Vince, thanks again.
No problem. Thank you.
Of course. This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.